Sanda, Sanshou, Chinese kickboxing, whatever you want to call it, is a really interesting sport with international competitions. But with combat sports getting a lot more interest of late, Sanda doesn't seem to be getting much of a look in. So should it be getting more recognition, and even should it perhaps even be in the Olympics? Hello folks, welcome back to the channel. My name's Matt. If you're new here, this is a channel about how Chinese martial arts enrich our lives. And today we're talking about Sanda. The time of filming, the Olympics are on, and it just got me thinking, why isn't Sanda in the Olympics? And I guess even more generally, why isn't it more popular? Let's be honest, if you're watching this channel, you probably know what Sanda is, but just in case you think you've lost yourself on that weird bit of YouTube, let me just go through a few bits so we're all on the same page here. Sanda is a type of combat sport that originated in China. So it uses punches, kicks, throws, sweeps, trips, even pushes, no elbows though. And the one thing that makes it unique is probably the Lei Tai, the platform that it's held on. It comes from historical competitions that would have happened in China, brought up to the modern day, but it was a raised platform that people would erect on which to hold competitions or to fight. Now it's obviously significant if you're able to push someone off the edge of that platform, which is something they use in Sanda still today, but historically they weren't these platforms that were tens of meters in the air. Actually, they were probably a meter off the ground. It just makes the combat more interesting in that you've got this extra dynamic to the entire proceedings. So in Sanda, the rounds are short with only 2 minutes each, which means that the fights can be quite exciting and the athletes are able to keep up that intensity all the way through each round. Hopefully. I don't tend to think about the origins of Sanda when I'm trying not to get punched in the face. However, I have asked Jeeves and I can confirm that it started in the the challenge matches, or has its roots in the challenge matches of ancient China. But I guess what we think of as Sanda today really started to become a thing around the early 20th century. Basically, the rules are leg kicks, torso kicks, head kicks, all points, punches to the body, head, points, throws. Those sometimes seem to vary depending on the competition that you go to. And I also know I've heard of some places allowing knees, although certainly not anywhere I've been. So with regards to grappling, you've got 2 seconds with which to execute your sweep or throw, whatever it is, after which point the ref will break you up. So if you can't complete a throw or a takedown of any sort within those 2 seconds, the ref will split you up and then it's back to punching and kicking, just so it doesn't end up in this complete grapple fest. If you push someone off the platform, the first time it happens, you get some points. The second time it happens though, you win the round. So it really makes you work on that ring craft. If you win the first 2 rounds, you've won the fight. If it's a round apiece, then we go to a 3rd round. I once had a fight that went to 4 rounds, so you do the maths on that one. Okay, so that's a bit of chat for the uninitiated. With the increase in interest in combat sports and in martial effectiveness of things, you'd think Sanda would be all the rage, wouldn't you? And it's clearly not. So let's talk about some of its strengths. Firstly, it's kind of the go-to sport for Kung Fu folks who want to test their art, get a bit of a dose of reality, and see if they can actually use what they've learned. For those who think that their martial art is too deadly for sports, obviously a finger jab to the eyes, if you put a glove on your hand, you can still work the same motion and then actually use it against an opponent who's reacting to what you're doing and maybe make you better at martial arts. Just a thought. So in a real fight, whatever that is, you can't expect to use a technique that you've never used against a human who's resisting what you're doing to work first time. Forms are great, they have their purpose, but they don't make you a great fighter. And that's where Sanda can help, I think. So I realise I can preach it into the converted at this point. Most of the strikes, throws, all the rest of it in traditional Kung Fu is all legal within Sanda. And so, of course, it's an opportunity to test out your art. Now, given the not so ideal showing of Kung Fu in the challenge matches in China in the last few years, a bit of reality could do us all some good, I think. So for kickboxers who want to add a bit of grappling to what they do, or Muay Thai people who want to perhaps add some throws into the repertoire beyond just sweeps, or even some judo people who, all right, obviously judo with gloves on and no gi changes the dynamic, but no gi judo totally works in Sanda. I feel like there could be some appeal to all of those groups, making Sanda, even more of a community. And so even for some of the MMA community, I can imagine if they just want to have a fight that's just punching, kicking, throws and sweeps, etc. It's still an interesting format. The 2 minute rounds as well, I think for spectators it can make it really interesting, fast-paced fights. There's no hanging around, people just get into it. And so that's another plus in my book. And also the Lei Tai adds another interesting dynamic into the whole of the proceedings, whereby one or even both people might end up flying off the side of it at some point during the fight. It makes it really dynamic, really interesting for people to watch. It really makes you work on your ring craft as well, because of course there's no ropes to lean on. So you get pushed out once, trouble, pushed out a second time, and you've lost that round. And there's this whole other aspect to it where for people who use kicks in their martial arts and you're training for a Sanda fight, you know, I've trained with some ex-taekwondo people and they've got some of these lovely kicks, but they often leave them hanging out in midair, sort of, it's not posing, but you know what I mean. Sort of, they don't immediately place the foot, chamber it and place it back down. So you can just grab the leg that's up, sweep the standing leg, and then you've got a takedown. So it really makes you work on your kicks and bringing them back quickly, placing, rooting, all of this stuff that we want to do in Chinese martial arts. So let's talk about the bad points, because obviously Sanda isn't the biggest sport in the world, so clearly there's a few things that need fixing. Now for me, I think something that should be addressed is how short that grappling period is. So 2 seconds is not a very long period of time at all to grapple and get some sort of takedown. Totally doable, of course, because people do it, but you have to have very good technique to come off with a nice clean takedown like that. I think if you doubled the amount of time to 4 seconds, where you can then clinch, start to work some sort of entry, and then if you fail at that, then there's more potential to then switch and do another throw, or they have time to try and reverse it. 4 seconds gives you more opportunities to that in my mind. Of course people do it, people do get takedowns and throws, it's part of Sanda, but I think just increasing the amount of time you can grapple would make it more interesting, but obviously still having some sort of time limit so it's not a complete grapple fest all the way through. Now another aspect that I think could be changed is the round time limits. 2 minutes isn't particularly long. If you ask me, just as I'm finishing a round, when I'm exhausted, drenched in sweat, breathing heavily, do you fancy another minute? I would probably say no, but actually if you think about it, 2 minutes is not a very long time. I once heard of a review for, this is going somewhere by the way, a review for Batman and Superman, the movie. I haven't seen it, but the reviewer said it's basically like someone smashing 2 action figurines together for 2 hours. Sanda with such short rounds can be a little bit like that. You're like, well, I've got to get my points in, and they just go at it for 2 minutes. So that does make for often some quite exciting fights to my mind. But there's a little bit less of the tactics to feel someone out. You haven't got long to sort of play around and see what people's movements are before you really got to start scoring points, and otherwise the clock's ticking down. I think if the rounds were 3 minutes long, again, I wouldn't enjoy it, having to do an extra minute, but I think it could actually add to the sport and make it a bit more technical, while still not making it, you know, so like a 5-minute round would be far too long, and then people would just slowly poke at each other and just try and work each other out. I think 3 minutes gives you a bit more time to have some more tactics, but still keeps up the tempo all the way through. So if we're considering its popularity and whether it would end up an Olympic sport, it's certainly an interesting enough sport that it could end up in the Olympics. But if you consider it against other combat sports like Muay Thai, which has got a huge international following and also isn't in the Olympics, it does seem to be like it's got some stiff competition to end up there. Now back in 2008, when the Olympics were held in Beijing, there was also a competition, a wushu competition that was held in Beijing as well, alongside. The idea being that sort of promoting wushu, so the taolu, the modern forms, gymnastic stuff, along with Sanda, to perhaps one day become an Olympic sport. So the International Wushu Federation, which I guess oversees Sanda, oversees Chinese kickboxing, that has been officially recognised by the International Olympic Committee, which is one of the first steps to actually becoming an Olympic sport. Now, interestingly, a sport like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that's actually being put in the 2024 Olympics. So there is this increasing interest in combat sports, and I think it'll be interesting to see whether Sanda can ever follow in its footsteps. So let's be honest, with Sanda's current popularity, it's not going to happen anytime soon. However, Sanda does have the opportunity to allow Kung Fu people to start to test their abilities and perhaps improve their art as well. It seems that, as far as I can tell, there are fewer people wanting to compete in Sanda competitions these days though, which I think is a shame. It would be cool if the Chinese martial arts community got behind Sanda and actually helped it and promoted it. It would create more opportunities for us to test ourselves against each other and see if the arts that we've learned, whether we can actually put them to good use. I guess it raises the question whether Chinese martial arts should remain folk arts, whether we should focus on combat, whether that's a good thing. And then that in turn, I kind of think raises the question, well, what is the point of Kung Fu? and this then gets deep really quickly. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you've even got this far through the video. Chinese martial arts are the root of Sanda, and if you want to know more about the roots of Chinese martial arts, then I recommend this video here for you. David Ross has done a great book on that. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next video.